So it snowed this weekend, and I was out with my 4-year-old son, and we were out throwing snowballs at each other this weekend. And I was making him laugh because I was throwing the snowballs at him, and as I threw the snowballs at him, I said, "Somebody's throwing snowballs at you. Who is that?" And he's like, "Daddy." I was like, "I'm not throwing snowballs at you," as I threw another snowball at him. And it was funny because it was so absurd. He just thought it was the silliest thing, and we had a lot of fun. I think you might find that example will relate to this case that we've just heard. Think about everything that you actually know compared to everything that Mark Bent is up here telling you. And have that in mind. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the evidence. There's been a lot. It's been quite a week. We'll go through a review of the evidence. I'll talk through some of the things that you've seen and try and draw your attention to certain things and help you to make your decision, because you are the decision makers. You'll be the ones who have to make this choice. So let's go ahead and see what we've got. One statement we have is, "My main goal was to kill Nick Bird. I tried to talk myself out of it. I followed through with said plans. You never know when someone is going to decide to do something about it," and I added those parentheses, "like me." In other words, Mark Bent is saying, you never know when someone like me is going to decide to do something about it, to make a decision to do something about it. That's what he wrote that himself. So what I would like to do is show you this, and I know you can't see that, but I just want to show you where we're at. So this is, and I'm going to show you the next screen, we'll have that blown up. So this is the Facebook message that he sends to mom and dad. Remember that one? So this is that Facebook message, and the next few slides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge it. I wish we had this screen, but I'm going to enlarge it, and hopefully you're able to see that. Now, I think you have this message in your packet, so if you want to pull that out, you can pull that out and follow along at the same time, or hopefully I've made it big enough for you. So this is mom and dad. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is not the message itself, it's the information above the message, so that you make sure that you see this. Okay, so I've blown that up. I don't know if you can see it. I think you can. That message, conversation details, first message sent, date and time. That message was sent on September 3rd, 2022 at 10:31 p.m. and 25 seconds. So see if you can kind of remember that, 10:31 and 25 seconds. Do you recall when the shooting itself actually happened, the minute? It was 10:28, do you remember that? So Nick Bird posted something on Snapchat, social media, at 10:27. We have the phone calls coming in at 10:29 to dispatch and things. It was 10:28. So this message was sent to mom and dad at 10:31. In other words, it was sent 3 minutes after the shooting. So 3 minutes after the shooting, he sends this message to mom and dad. Okay? And what message does he send? Mom and dad, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but I have just committed murder. Of someone in the car scene, we know that's Nick Bird, of someone in the car scene here that was involved with slandering and threatening me, and I'm either going to jail for the rest of my life or going to commit suicide. Is this a suicide note? This is not a suicide note. He's thinking about it, but he's either going to go to jail or he's going to commit suicide, and hasn't really decided about that yet. He's not sure. He's thinking about, I might end up going to jail, I might commit suicide, but he hasn't, this is not, I'm going to commit suicide and that's it. No, it's I'm either going to jail, might commit suicide, but look at the next line. I tried to talk myself out of it. What is it? He tried to talk himself out of doing something that he's already done. I tried to talk myself out of it. Of course, it's shooting Nick. I tried to talk myself out of it. But I've been in this situation before, so I'm just going to continue to be a failure no matter how hard I try. Seemed like the post office was going to give me a job, but I've not heard from them. Again, I'm sorry about this. I know I said I wouldn't do anything to break your hearts, but I will just continue to disappoint you. Even if I get another job, I'm just going to end up quitting, just like the many others. Is he getting fired from his jobs? He's quitting. I'm just going to end up quitting, just like the many others. My life has proven to be a roller coaster that shows hope followed by failure. It seems to be higher highs followed by lower lows as time goes on. Please adopt Curtis, his cat, and take care of him for me. He is in the house in Pocatello and has enough food and water for a week, maybe 2. But please don't wait that long. You can have anything of mine also. I love you both and hope you can understand. Mark, and that's the address to the new house he just bought. This is the next thing in that message. Right after he sends that, you can see a couple of minutes go by, and then Sarah joined the call. Do you remember his parents' names? Sarah and Bill, or William. So Sarah joins the call 2 minutes after he sends that at 10:33. Bill joins the call a minute after that at 10:34. You see that? And then it looks like Sarah's in some way trying to join the call. Maybe it's not working. And back to Sarah, you can see Sarah's number is the one that ends with 931. Sarah joined the call, 931. Next one down, Sarah joined the call, 931. And 931 writes, this is Sarah, this is Mom. Mark, please call me. Help us to understand. And that's the end of the message. So the shooting happened at 10:28 p.m. 10:28. Do you remember what happened at 9:58, which is exactly 30 minutes before the shooting? 9:58, 30 minutes later is 10:28. So it's exactly 30 minutes before the shooting. Do you remember that? I would like you to pull out what I believe is States 27, and it's this one. And go ahead and turn with me to page 4. This is the one with the friends I am saddened to say message. Page 4, and it says friends I am saddened to say on page 4. We're actually not looking at the friends message though. Look below the friends message. And it says record 2. Do you see that where it says record 2? So it says record 2. Title, Mom and Dad, created July 8th, 2022. Do you see that? The Mom and Dad message was created on July 8th of 2022. Look a little bit below that. It was last modified on July 18th, 2022. So he made some changes 10 days later, still in July. Okay, turn the page. And there we have the message that he composed. This is the message that's composed that was last modified on July 18th, 2022. Okay, now go to the bottom of the page where it says record 3. Record 3, talking about the same message, Mom and Dad. And we have a last modified date and time. You see that? Last modified. The last time this was modified or changed was when? September 3rd, 2022, 9:58 p.m. 30 minutes before he took Nick Bird's life, he last modified this message. So as he's sitting in his truck, picture this, he's sitting in his truck, he's been parked behind his truck for 2 hours. He's sitting there, and he finishes modifying, he last modifies this message, Mom and Dad. And the message again is, 30 minutes before he does it, Mom and Dad, I tried to talk myself out of it. 30 minutes before he shoots him, I tried to talk myself out of it. But I have just committed murder. Okay, and you can put that away. Or keep looking at it, whichever you choose. So let's just review some of the evidence very quickly. Mark Bent has admitted to nearly all of this, but let's just look at some of the evidence really quick. So we've got our detectives, did some excellent detective work. They found the casings around the car, they found the bullet fragments. Here's a picture. You remember this picture? That's Nick Bird's car. You've got all the, the little tents showing all the evidence, mostly casings, some bullet fragments, some other things. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this next picture. I zoomed in on the windshield just to give you, just to maybe answer a question in your minds. What does that say on his windshield, the lower part of his windshield? Can you see that on that screen? Do you see that it says Castaways? Castaways? And that was the name of the car club that he was part of. It says Castaways. And then that's just a close-up of the little tents. You can see there's, we've seen that before. There were 17 shots, we know that. 16 of the casings were found the very night. A 17th casing was found the next day. And the next morning, we heard about that. We had the doctor give the autopsy. We got the bullets, there was gouges in the asphalt. So we know that he was shot, Nick Bird was shot on his right side quite a bit. In other words, for whatever reason, his right side was facing the shooter, Mark Bent. We know from the direction and angle. Do you remember when there was that dummy up here and they were using that dowel to demonstrate the angle of the shots? Do you remember that the angles were not perpendicular? For example, they were not like straight into the person, but they were angular like this, or up like that. And so how would you get that if Nick Bird is standing? It's not easy. What if he was lying down and the shooter's standing over him? Much easier, right? So it looks pretty clear that Nick Bird was lying on the ground as those bullets were coming in. And then there were abrasions. Remember the doctor said in exit wounds, usually it's a pretty clean spot in an exit wound, but in some of his exit wounds, some of the places where the bullet exited the skin, there was abrasions around it. And she said that will happen when the skin or the person's body is up against something hard, like a chair or like a wall, or in this case, like what? Like asphalt, right? So he was on the ground, he was getting shot, and some of those bullets were getting stopped by asphalt, pretty much. All right, William Bent, that's the dad. So William Bent, we heard from him, he testified on Zoom. And he told us some interesting things. He told us that the defendant, Mark Bent, called William. And his son told him, and I said, William Bent believed him. I said, did you believe your son? Yeah, I believed him. And he also said, I said, would you protect your son if you needed to? Yeah, he'd protect him. He would protect him. Mark Bent told his dad that he shot someone. He told him that he shot someone. And William Bent, the dad, I asked him, what else did he say? What else did your son tell you? Not much. Pretty much nothing else. He just told me he shot someone. Did you believe him? Yeah, I believed him. And I asked the dad, did you receive any text messages or Facebook Messenger messages from your son that night? Anything noteworthy that he sent you? Nope. Or not that he recalls. Well, at 9:30 or at 10:31, his son sent a message that says, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry to say I just committed murder. Dad, are you sure you don't remember receiving that message from your son? A message from your son that says he just committed murder? And by the way, Dad, you joined the call at 10:34. Are you sure you don't remember receiving that? But he would protect his son. Maybe he's just trying to protect his son. I don't remember receiving any messages. Okay. What about when I asked Dad, did you tell anyone else what your son told you? Did you talk to anybody else about what you just heard from Mark Bent? He thought for a while. I was like, well, I told some family members later, some later date. Okay. Anybody else? No. Are you sure you didn't call 911 about your son? You and I know that he did call 911. We heard the 911 call. He calls 911, asks, do you know why I'm calling? I don't know why you're calling. Well, how can I help you? The dispatcher says. Well, my son just shot someone. Well, how do you know? Well, he just called me. So he kept that part out from me. He apparently didn't want to tell us that his son sent him a message, and he didn't want to tell us that he had called 911. We know that he did. He wants to protect his son, maybe. And, you know, you can hardly blame a dad, right? Maybe for that. He wants to protect his son. Do you know what else his dad did not tell us? I said, did your son tell you anything else? No. He did not tell us that his son said he blacked out. William Bent never told us that his son said he blacked out. Why wouldn't William Bent tell us that? If his son said, I blacked out, Dad, and I don't know, but I woke up and there was a guy dead. Why would William Bent hold that piece of information back? Wouldn't that kind of help his son? Wouldn't that help protect his son if his dad would tell us that? Why would he hold that back? I don't think he would. What that means to me is that Mark Bent never told his dad that he blacked out. He never told his dad that. Why wouldn't Mark Bent tell his dad that he blacked out? Why would he keep that detail away from his parents? Because if anything, that would maybe in some way make him seem maybe he's a little bit less accountable or something like that, but he didn't tell Dad that. Why wouldn't he do that? Could it be that he didn't think of that idea until some later time? The phone call was only 10 minutes after the shooting. Could it be that he thought of the idea of blacking out at some later time because we didn't hear it from Dad? Okay, we have the dash camera. We know what he did. He drove from Pocatello to Idaho Falls, and he went and checked out the car club areas, the places where the car clubs regularly meet, and he knows that. So there were a few places. Any parking lot, maybe on 17th, is a decent place to go. It sounds like they go to Best Buy pretty regularly, so there's some parking lots near Best Buy. He circles through that Best Buy parking lot about 3 times. Did you notice that? As you're watching it, it was almost like, wait, have we seen this part already? No, it was just his second and then third time of coming to Best Buy. So he keeps coming to Best Buy, and you can see the car club is meeting there. The cars are all facing out, the people are there. We saw that. So we know he did that. Then he goes to Nick Bird's neighborhood. We saw that on the dash cam. He turns left off the main road, goes into the neighborhood. And then in the neighborhood, he goes around, he sees Nick Bird's car, does not stop, and then circles around and comes back again to where Nick Bird's car is, and this time parks behind the car. Remember that? So, and there was one car between them. There was that kind of white car between them, so he parks with his truck, and then there's the white car, and then there's Nick Bird's car. So he circled around one time. Why would he do that? Let's think about that. He parked behind Nick's car at about 8:15 p.m. that night, and then he killed Nick at about 10:28 and drove away. Okay, what I would like to do now is I would like to watch a few clips of that dash camera and point a couple of things out to you. So let's see if we can get that. Okay, so what we're going to watch here, let me get through there. So this is going to be the first pass around Nick's car as you're going along. Now I'm just going to let you, and actually just stop it for just 1 second. I don't know if you can see these little blue numbers here, but if you can, I can't enlarge them in any way. So, do you recall that the police officer said that the camera timestamp was 14 hours ahead? Okay, so this right here shows 10:13, and it's 14 hours ahead. Okay, so let's try and do some time math. Let's just say it's 12 hours ahead. If it's 10:13, this would be in the morning. Then 12 hours before would be 10:13 at night. And then 14 hours before would be 2 hours before that. You got it? So 2 hours before 10:13 at night is 8:13 at night. So although this says 10:13, it would be the day of September 4th. In other words, the morning of September 4th is 14 hours earlier. It's 8:13 at night. So he's arrived in Nick's neighborhood at 8:13 at night, not on the 4th, but 14 hours earlier on the 3rd. You with me? So it's 8:13 p.m. on September 3rd is what we're seeing. Okay, go ahead and play it. That's the random white car, and then there's Nick's car. Drives right by it very slowly. It's kind of subtle. Watch his truck kind of go in just a little, as if he's going to park. Right there. You see that? And then he continues on. Let's go ahead and stop it. And then the next one is when he actually parks behind Nick. So this is after he's already passed Nick the first time. Now you can see it's 10:15, actually 8:15. And then clearly he pulls off the road. He's planning to stop. Okay, I don't know why he almost looked like he was going to pull off the first time. I'm not really sure. But it does cross my mind that maybe he's thinking about pulling over behind Nick, changes his mind, loses his nerve for just a moment. I'm not sure. And then he keeps going, circles around one more time, and parks. Okay, the next thing I would like to watch, just because we've been on this topic, and we're going to watch him actually leaving the shooting scene in a moment. But first, I would like to watch. This is him just driving away a couple of minutes after the shooting has already occurred. Now you saw this, but I know it was all very quick. Okay, go ahead and pause for just a moment. Okay, so this is This is the very first time that Mark Bent has arrived at a stoplight. After he's left the shooting scene, he's finally arrived at his very first stoplight. Okay? What is the time? It's 12:31:24, so let's do the time math and go back 14 hours. Let's start by going back 12 hours, so 12:31 on the 4th would actually be midnight 31, on the night of the 3rd, but go 2 hours before that to get to the full 14, and we are at 10:31 and 24 seconds. You got that? So this is 10:31 and 24 seconds, 3 minutes after he's just shot and killed Nick. It's 10:31. Do you recall when he sent the message, "Mom and Dad, I've just committed murder"? Do you remember the time there? It was 10:31 and 25 seconds. Right here, we're at 10:31 and 24. We're going to push play in a minute, and we'll get to 10:31 and 25. But what's he doing while he's parked right here at this stoplight? Sending a message to Mom and Dad. See that? So we'll start it from the beginning, and what you'll notice is as the light turns green, all the other cars start going. His pauses for just a minute, and you'll see, why did he pause? Piece of cake, he's on his phone. He's sending a message to Mom and Dad, maybe following up or watching it or whatever. You'll just kind of see that. So let's play that from the beginning. "22, 23, 24, sends the message. Green light. All the other cars start moving, he stays put, and then realizes that he needs to go. You got that? So he sent the message at 10:31 and 25 seconds while he was parked at that stoplight. Okay, let's go ahead and stop that one. And let's go ahead and play the last video. This last video is not easy to watch, it's difficult to watch. You are going to see Nick lying in the road. I'm going to pause it so that you can see Nick. Okay, so there he is. And you can see 12:28, actually it's 10:28 p.m. He's just shot Nick. Starting his car. Go ahead. And go ahead and pause. Or maybe back it up there. Do you see that? That's Nick lying right there. He's just shot him 17 times. Do you remember the first time that he passed by the car but then decided not to park and circle back around? So is it possible to drive by here and keep going straight? Yes, it is. But for whatever reason, and I don't know why, he does not just drive right past him. He kind of backs up. This is sort of a three-point turn and ends up going the opposite direction. Let's go ahead and watch. So he could have just gone straight out, backs up, goes another way. That's it, he leaves the scene. You can see the miles per hour down there, it's 23 miles per hour. 19 miles per hour, 17 miles per hour, 16 miles per hour. Picks up a little speed. And that's it. Okay. So that's the dash camera. Then he was arrested. We know all the details about that. He was in Alberson's parking lot. Oh. Thanks. All right, so he's arrested. He was in Albertson's parking lot. They found a gun, 9mm. We know, I mean, this is all just, we know all this. 9mm gun in slide lock position on the passenger seat, bunch of magazines full of bullets. We got the dash camera, there's a phone, there's even safety glasses, and there's earplugs, which he confirmed he did not use while he was doing the shooting. He didn't put those earplugs in, he didn't put the safety glasses on, but he did fire a 9mm handgun. Of course, he was holding it, so it was, what, 2 feet from his ears? I don't know if you've ever heard a gun go off 2 feet from your ears without any ear protection. Easy to black out when that noise is going on. We have 5 confessions from Mark Bent. What were they? Confession number 1, Mom and Dad, I have just committed murder of someone in the car scene here that was involved with slandering and threatening me. Tried to talk myself out of it. Last edited at 9:58, sent to his parents 3 minutes after he shot Nick. Confession number 2, last modified at 10:32 p.m. And that's on your sheet here. I'll maybe let you go find this on your own. The friends I am saddened to say, last modified at, I'm not sure this was the, oh it is, yeah. Oh, let's find it together. Page 4 of that same one we were just on. So page 4 of the one we were just on, the friends I am saddened to say. You got that? Friends, I am saddened to say. Well, when was that last modified? Go up to the kind of information above where it says friends, and it's right there. Last modified, 9/3/2022 at 10:32. So he had stopped at the stoplight, sent Mom and Dad the message at 10:31, and then, I guess while driving, 10:32, he last modified friends, I am saddened to say. So while driving, he's editing this message. Let's read it. You've got it right there in front of you. I'll put it on the screen. Friends, I am saddened to say that I have committed some serious crimes today. Last modified at 10:32, 4 minutes after the shooting. I'm saddened to say that I've committed some serious crimes today that will put me in jail for the rest of my life or lead to death. As some of you know, shortly after I moved to Idaho Falls, I was slandered on Facebook with rumors of me being an undercover police officer. Those rumors were followed by threats, harassment, and more slander, even after the facts were out that I am not a police officer of any kind. People still chose to believe it and continue to harass, threaten me, and eventually look up where I live and work and post it on the internet. This all started from me being involved with a local Facebook group called East Idaho Speed Hunters and a car club called the Castaways. After being involved with the Castaways for a short time and seeing that they were involved with a lot of illegal activities, I departed from them. Because of that, the rumor of me being an undercover police officer began, and even though it seemed to pass, the rumor eventually came back to light. People kept posting about me on Speed Hunters in a negative way to the point where I started to think about what? This is kind of quite a statement. I started to think about attacking on one of the car meets and shows they attend. If that wasn't enough, next line, but my main goal was to kill Nick Bird. Last edited at 10:32, 4 minutes after the shooting. My main goal was to kill Nick Bird, the founder of the Castaways that started all of this by spreading rumors. He also posted where I work. So I told myself that if anything were to happen to my job, I will go after him. Unfortunately for him and his friends, I lost my job recently, so I followed said plans. How did he lose his job? Do you remember that? How did he lose his job with UPS? Do you remember what happened? Other people were quitting. He was ending up having to work more than he wanted to, so he quit. So he quit. How is Nick Bird involved in that at all? He quit his job because he's getting more work than he wanted to do, so he quit. Somehow is blaming that on Nick Bird. Unfortunately, for Nick Bird and his friends, I lost my job, I quit my job. Unfortunately for Nick, I quit my job. So I followed my plans to kill Nick Bird. Please let this be a lesson for those who think it's okay to spread rumors about someone and try to negatively impact their life on social media. You never know when someone is going to decide to do something about it, because if they do, it's too late. Signed, Mark. You never know if Mark Bent is going to decide to do something about Nick Bird. You never know. Confession number 3, we've already gone over. Phone call to his father. The dad says, my son, Mark Bent, shot somebody. That's to the dispatcher. The lady says, how do you know about this? He says, well, he called me. Confession number 4, Mark Bent's 911 call on himself, where he says, I need to turn myself in. I shot someone. His name is Nikolas Bird. And by the way, I blacked out when I shot him. Did he tell that to the dispatcher? He sure didn't. What happened? I blacked out. I don't know. Did he say that? No. What a crucial detail to leave out. And then confession number 5 is Mark Bent right here in court, where for the very first time we hear that he blacked out. Do you remember some jail phone calls to his friend who testified here in court? And his friend said, we got a jail phone call from Mark Bent, and he talked to us about the Facebook post and all this. Did his friend say, and he also told us he blacked out? Did you hear the friend say that? Nope. So he certainly doesn't have to tell the police about blacking out, but might he have told his father? Or might he have told the dispatcher? And might he have told his friends that he blacked out if he actually did black out? Wouldn't that be quite a detail to include as you're talking to your friends and family? But he did not. So you might be thinking, what am I missing? He's confessed 5 times to this shooting. He wrote about it. He talked about it in audio that we've heard. He premeditated and, weighed whether to kill this guy, and he did it, and he told us he did it. What am I missing? I think that's why my little son this weekend was laughing so much. He was having fun. It was so silly to have me throwing a snowball at him and saying, I'm not throwing a snowball at you. Somebody is, but it's not me. And he was just laughing. If this weren't so tragic, it would be funny. It's absurd. He's trying to tell us that he didn't plan and carry out this killing when clearly he did. Okay, what is Mark Bent trying to get you jurors to believe? What is he trying to get you to think? Let's think about the word blacked out, first of all. Typically when we hear the word blacked out, we think something along the lines of, for example, if your friend or family came to you and said, I blacked out, you would probably think they're saying they passed out, or they went unconscious, or they fainted. They blacked out, something like that. They lost consciousness. Is that what Mark Bent is that what he's saying when he's saying he blacked out? Did he go unconscious? Definitely not, because during that period, he shot and killed someone. He pulled the trigger 17 times. So he didn't go unconscious, that's for sure. Even he agrees with that. So what does he mean when he says he blacked out? All he means is he does not remember. That's his claim. We'll talk more about if we should even buy that in a minute. But he's claiming not that he went unconscious, not that he fainted, passed out, lost consciousness. No, all he's saying is, I don't remember after he pulled the gun out of his pickup truck. He doesn't remember what he did next, is his claim. So let's don't accidentally get confused and think he went unconscious during that time. He's just saying he doesn't remember. He's also trying to get you to believe that he did not premeditate this act. He's trying to get you to think that it was sort of like a random moment that had nothing leading up to it. So let's take a look at your jury instructions, and there's a couple pages. I know we just read the whole thing. Let's take a couple minutes and look at some of the instructions. So go ahead and pull out this one, and if you'll turn to instruction number 18, please. First degree murder. Instruction number 18. In order for the defendant to be guilty of first-degree murder with malice aforethought, the state, and we'll talk about malice aforethought in just a second. With malice aforethought, the state must prove each of the following. Number 1, on or about the 3rd day of September 2022, and let's just check that box. Was it the 3rd day of September 2022? Yes, it was. Easy. Number 2, in the county of Bonneville in the state of Idaho? We can just check that box. It was in Idaho Falls. Yes, it was in the county of Bonneville in the state of Idaho. Number 3, the defendant, Mark Jason Bent, engaged in conduct which caused the death of Nikolas T. Bird. Let's just check that box. He's already agreed. He did it. He's told us. We heard it from his own mouth. Number 4, the defendant acted without justification or excuse. Was there a good reason that he did that? Some good reason to justify the actions he took? No, piece of cake. We can check that box. Number 5, he did it with malice aforethought. That's just a weird word. Let's talk about that in a second. And number 6, the murder was a willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. And you can kind of just stop there. That's the end of that part. The next part is just explaining what does premeditation mean. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 ends with the murder was a willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. But what is premeditation? Well, let's have a look. It means to consider beforehand. Had he considered whether to kill Nick? I tried to talk myself out of it. Whether to kill or not to kill, and then to decide to kill. There does not have to be any appreciable period of time during which the decision to kill was considered, as long as it was what? Reflected upon. I tried to talk myself out of it. As long as it was reflected upon before the decision was made. A mere unconsidered and rash impulse, even though it includes an intent to kill, is not premeditation. Let's look at malice aforethought. That's the next page. This is just a strange phrase. We use it in the law. Go to the very last thing you see on that page, the last paragraph. I think it'll be easier to just take care of the word aforethought. What does aforethought mean? Piece of cake. The word aforethought does not imply deliberation or the lapse of time. Here it is. Aforethought, only means that the malice must precede rather than follow the act. In other words, the malice has to happen before the action. In this case, the malice had to happen before the shooting, not after the shooting. That's all aforethought means. It just means that he had the malice before he shot him, not after he shot him. Okay? Not too hard to understand that. Strange word, but easy to understand. And then malice, of course, is, there's 2 ways you could see malice. It can be either express, meaning sort of like open and easy. And by the way, of course, I'm kind of helping you through these instructions. Your default will always just go back to the actual written instructions. Malice may be express or implied. This is the top of the page. Malice is expressed when there is manifested a deliberate intention unlawfully to kill a human being. Did Mark Bent ever manifest a deliberate intention unlawfully to kill a human being? My main goal was to kill Nick Bird. Did he manifest a deliberate intention unlawfully to kill Nick Bird? I think so. So the main thing I think that we're looking at then in this case is whether it was premeditated. Whether it was premeditated, and that's number 6 on the previous instruction, number 18. Was this willful, deliberate, and premeditated? Okay, malice. All right, let's go to willful, instruction 20. What does willful mean? That's not such a hard word, but let's just read it anyway. An act is, this is instruction 20. An act is willful or done willfully when done on purpose. Done on purpose. Not an accident, you meant to do it, it was on purpose. One can act willfully without intending to violate the law, to injure another, or to acquire any advantage. Let's take a look at a couple more. So second-degree murder, go to instruction 21. Second-degree murder, the way to think of this is second-degree murder is first-degree murder, except without the premeditated part. Do you see instructions 1 through 5 there on second-degree murder? Do you see instruction number 6 there? Or number 6 on second degree? It's not there. 6, premeditation, is only on first-degree murder. You got that? Everything else is identical. And then let's just go to the verdict form. This is the part where you actually have to write something down. So instruction number 28. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question 1, is Mark Jason Ben guilty or not guilty of first-degree murder? Our hope is that you'll check the box that says guilty of first-degree murder. That's a decision you'll have to make. If you decide not guilty on question 1, you go to question 2, and then it's just, is he guilty or not guilty of second-degree murder? And the last one, question 3, next page, is just, it's a simple one about whether the firearm was a deadly weapon. Okay, so there might be something in your minds. I can see this happening, perhaps for a juror, of feeling like you need to believe Mark Bent, feeling like you need to believe the testimony he just gave. So I'm here to give you permission that you don't have to believe Mark Bent. You don't have to believe what he told you up here. And I'm going to give you some possible reasons why about that. Now, in particular, he wants us to believe the part about blacked out. He kind of gave us everything else. He told us, pretty much confirmed everything the police, the detectives, with their excellent work, had already figured out. But then he surprised everybody, probably surprising his dad, surprising the dispatcher, surprising his friends, by saying he blacked out the other day on the stand here. You don't have to believe that. For one thing, this is the shooter's story of what happened. And it's something that perhaps makes him seem to be slightly less accountable for his action if he can get you to believe that he blacked out. You don't have to believe that. That's the shooter telling you why he's less accountable than he ought to be. So I think you should approach that with a great deal of skepticism. The shooter himself is telling you something that makes him perhaps appear to be less accountable. Immediately go into that with a fair dose of skepticism, I would say. Why else might you not believe Mark Bent? Well, his reason for going to Idaho Falls. Do you remember all of that? He left Pocatello and he went to Idaho Falls. And according to him, he is about to go meet up with friends at the car clubs, friends at the car meets. That was what he said he was intending to do. That's his plan. The more I thought about that, the less sense that made. So he's in Pocatello, and he has not had almost any contact with any of these car club people for at least 3 months. And the contact that he has had up until 3 months before the shooting, and the months before that, what was the contact that he had with these friends? A whole bunch of online fights, a whole bunch of heated arguments that he told us the interactions he was having with Nick Bird and maybe others was heated arguments online. He also told us that months before, he finally decided to leave the car club. He didn't even want to be part of it anymore because of what he considered to be their illegal activities. So he left the car club because he didn't appreciate their illegal activities. He also talked about he didn't like maybe after that happened, he didn't like the harassment, the rumors that he was receiving. He hasn't even been in the car club for months and months. The only interaction he's had with them is just fights online with these people. On his way to the car club meetup from Hotel Idaho Falls, did he text anybody, call anybody, hey, I'm going to come meet up with you guys? Nothing like that. And yet he's trying to get us to believe that apparently after months and months of nothing but fighting with these guys online, he wants to go meet up with them and say hello. That's kind of hard to believe that that was his purpose. That's what he told us. That's why he went to Idaho Falls that day. That's hard to believe that. Nick's neighborhood. Why did he end up in Nick's neighborhood that night? Nick Bird's neighborhood. Why did he go there? Do you know where he was before Nick's neighborhood? Best Buy. Best Buy and Buffalo Wild Wings, a bunch of places that are clear across town over on 17th Street. So he's over there circling Best Buy a few times, and then totally randomly decides to drive clear across town, 15 or 20 minute drive, and totally randomly makes a left turn, totally randomly ends up in Nick Bird's neighborhood, which by coincidence is where a guy lives that he previously has already composed a message he intends to kill. My main goal was to kill Nick Bird. That was composed in July. And by coincidence circles around Nick Bird's car, and by coincidence parks behind Nick's car, had no intention whatsoever of even being in Nick's neighborhood. It was random, and he doubled down on that about 3 or 4 times. There was no reason. So was he just going to go park in any neighborhood? He was just trying to find a neighborhood in Idaho Falls to park in? Any neighborhood would do? He was just going to go park and what, listen to music or something like that? So the neighborhood that he ends up with is clear across town, and it ends up being Nick Bird's neighborhood, and he circles around Nick's car, and he parks behind Nick's car, and then he kills Nick? Are we sure this was a random neighborhood? Are we sure we should buy this story that we're hearing from him? You don't have to believe Mark Bent. He was in great shock after the shooting. He was in such great shock that he doesn't even know why he posted stuff. He doesn't know why he sent a mom and dad message. Why did you send that message to your mom and dad? I was in shock. I was freaking out was the words he used. I was freaking out, didn't really know what he was sending, had a million thoughts in his mind. And why did you post the Facebook post? Don't know. Freaking out. He was in great shock. He was in great shock. He was in such great shock. But he did have the presence of mind to execute a very careful kind of 3-point turn to back up and drive out the opposite way, rather than going out the same way he had previously gone out, which probably would have been easier. But he was in great shock, still had the presence of mind to pull out like that, had the presence of mind to, on his phone while driving at the stoplight, had the presence of mind to go into his phone, find the notes that he has previously composed, select the notes, if you know how to do that, select all, had the presence of mind to copy that, had the presence of mind to paste it into a note to his parents, and had the presence of mind to push send. All while freaking out. 1 minute later, he had the presence of mind while driving to edit, "Friends, I am saddened to say." He's totally freaking out. But while driving, he's able to edit, "Friends, I am saddened to say." And then while freaking out, by the way, he's driving 16, 20 miles per hour. He's not racing down the street. Then he parks, calls up his dad while freaking out, totally freaking out, calls up his dad. Doesn't tell him a whole lot, apparently. I just shot someone. And then while freaking out, you heard his voice on 911 call of what I would say is the calmest person I've ever heard who apparently is freaking out. "I just shot someone. I need to turn myself in. I'll be in the Albertsons parking lot. I'll keep my hands in the air for when the police come to get me." Nothing about blacking out. So was he really freaking out, or did he purposely post those messages so the people would see them? I think he did. So again, you don't have to believe Mark Bent. We already talked about this. There's no other mention of blacking out at all to anybody, including a bunch of people you would think that he would have mentioned that to. You don't have to believe Mark Bent that he blacked out. And then the timing of the blackout, that was very interesting. So he didn't black out at all driving from Pocatello to Idaho Falls. Didn't black out. He never blacked out as he's circling the car clubs 3 or 4 times. Never blacked out. He never blacked out as he's driving clear across town to Nick's neighborhood. Fully aware, seems to remember all of that. Didn't black out as he was pulling into Nick's neighborhood. Didn't black out as he circled around. Didn't black out as he parked at 8:15. Didn't black out for 2 hours while he sat there waiting for Nick. Never blacked out. Didn't black out when he went and smashed the mirror with a rock. Fully conscious, fully aware of that. He didn't black out when he's standing outside his truck. He didn't black out when he pulled the gun out of his truck, and then he blacked out. And how long did he black out for? Long enough to fire 17 shots, and then he blacked back in. You don't have to believe Mark Bent about blacking out. You also don't have to decide whether Mark Bent feels regret. There's this part of us that may feel as a juror, like, did he feel remorse? Did he feel regret? You don't even have to decide that. All you have to do is decide if he did it. You don't have to decide if he regrets it. Now, he told us he regrets it. I'm skeptical. I think it was Friday. Yeah, it was Friday, almost the last question. My colleague asked him something like, something about, you shot him 17 times. And Mark Bent corrected my partner, my colleague, I didn't shoot him 17 times. I shot at him 17 times. Okay, all right. So you shot him 15 times. Is that a correction of a guy who just truly feels remorse and regret for what he did? I don't think so. Unfortunately for him and his friends, I lost my job recently. I quit my job recently. Nothing to do with Nick Bird. I lost my job recently, so I followed said plans. Is that a guy who feels remorse for what he did? So I just wrote, if it did happen, I could tell my parents. What was he talking about when he said that? He's talking about the mom and dad message. Why did you write the mom and dad message 2-3 months before you shot Nick? Why would you write that? Well, he wrote it so if it did happen, if the shooting did happen, I could tell my parents. If the shooting did, that was his answer. Why did you write that? He told us. I wrote it so that if it did happen, if the shooting did happen, but that makes it sound like he's talking about an earthquake or a hurricane. If the hurricane happened, I could tell my parents. If the earthquake happened, I could tell my parents. If the shooting happened, I could tell my parents. Does that kind of not work in your brain? Maybe you don't have control over an earthquake or a hurricane, but he has control over whether the shooting happened. So why did you write that message? Well, if it happened, if the shooting happened, I could tell my parents. Is this a guy who feels regret and remorse? I don't think so. The shooting happened. He kind of says the same thing again. The shooting happened, and I don't know, I guess I was in shock. Why did you post that message on Facebook? The shooting happened. I had no control over it. The shooting happened, and I don't know, I guess I was in shock. Is he taking responsibility for what happened that day? I don't think so. So, Mark Bent's answer, his attorney asked him, did you intend to kill Nick Bird? This was last Friday. Did you intend to kill Nick Bird? Today he said no. Did you hear that? He asked him the same question twice. He asked him, did you intend to kill Nick Bird? Today the answer was no. Friday the answer was a very, very long pause. Remember that? He sat there for quite a while. I was curious to know what he was going to say. He sat there for so long that it was like, I'm not sure he heard the question. But he finally answered. And what did he say on Friday? Did you intend to kill Nick Bird? Long pause. Well, finally he says, not necessarily. Not necessarily. But I wanted to retaliate in response to everything that happened. The threats, posting the address, the location. Didn't necessarily want to kill him. But he did want to retaliate. Well, how might you intend to retaliate as you're pulling a gun out of your car, looking at a guy that you hate, and that you've previously composed a note that you just killed Nick Bird? How might you retaliate with that gun? What are some of the options of retaliating with a loaded gun? Did he intend to kill Nick Bird? I'll tell you the answer. Yes, he did. When did Mark Bent decide to kill Nick? Well, he had a gun and magazine on his truck seat, a gun and maybe 4 magazines on his truck seat as he's leaving Pocatello. He drove to the car club scene, and by the way, we already know he's telling people he had threatened or he had considered attacking, that was the word he used, attacking the car club scene, circles around about 3 or 4 times. He drove to Nick's neighborhood, he circled around Nick's neighborhood, he waited for 2 hours. At 9:58, he wrote, "I tried to talk myself out of it," and then he intentionally got the gun from his seat, and we asked him, "Did you intentionally get the gun from your seat?" Yes. He intentionally reached in, got the gun from the seat. When did he decide to kill Nick? I think it was in Pocatello. Because his answer about why he came to Idaho Falls makes absolutely no sense. And his answer about why he ended up in Nick's neighborhood makes no sense whatsoever. And his answer about why did you compose at 9:58 makes no sense at all. And pretty much he said he didn't know. Well, we know. He had all the weapons, the bullets, everything he needed, drove to the car meets, apparently was thinking of attacking the car meets, ended up in Nick's neighborhood, and killed him. So, as jurors, and I'm almost done, as jurors, it's not always easy to give a judgment like this, that somebody is guilty, and especially of a crime like this, first-degree murder. It may not be the easiest decision to make. There is a way I can suggest that it might make it a little easier in your minds to make this decision, and that is to use the word sorry. Sorry. And what do I mean? Sorry, but this is not how to deal with your problems. Sorry, but you're a grown-up. Sorry, but our society doesn't accept this type of behavior. Sorry that you're not really able to hang on to a job for whatever reason. Sorry. We're sorry that you haven't really been able to crack into this car club of 20-year-olds. Sorry. And sorry that you apparently feel like a failure. Sorry that nothing seems to be going your way. Sorry about that. But we have laws, and you cannot do this. Sorry that you're frustrated, resentful, and bitter. But look what you have done. And you might be wondering or thinking about, why did he post the Facebook message, the public Facebook message, the friends I am saddened to say? Why did he post that? What did he post it in order to avoid getting caught by the police and to lay low until it blew over? Clearly not. Did he post it because he felt so ashamed of what he had done and he wanted to sort of apologize in some? Obviously not. Why did he post that? Why did he modify it 4 minutes after he killed Nick and then post it? Why would he do that? Well, you may have heard of something that we sometimes see in children's classrooms, children in a school classroom. Have you ever heard that negative attention is better than being ignored? You ever heard about that or thought about that? Sometimes in school classrooms, a child who wants some attention and is maybe not really getting it, what do they sometimes do? Just kids. They might act out, right? Bug their teacher, somehow take control of the situation. And that's the word, control. Because that little kid probably doesn't feel like they have a lot of control. Maybe they're not doing very well in school, or maybe they're just not getting the attention they want. But actually they think, well, I have a way to control this classroom, actually. I have a way, and that is to act out. And then I am the one who's dictating what happens in this classroom. And unfortunately and tragically, we sometimes see that same behavior in adults. Out of a sense of wanting to control, and out of a sense of wanting to dictate, and out of a sense of wanting to be, I'm actually the one in charge, and I can do something successfully. And so Mark Bent has sent a message to all of his car club people, pretty much. Friends, I'm saddened to say that I just killed Nick Bird. So I can make a goal, and I can be a success, and I can carry something out. And by the way, I was the one who decided whether Nick lived or died. And just so you know, I also decided if some of you lived or died. I was thinking about attacking the car club scene. Just want to let you know that. Lucky for you, I, who am in control, decided not to do that. Aren't you lucky? But I want you to make sure you know who's in charge, and it's Mark Bent. He wants people to know that he's in control. In fact, did you notice while he was testifying anything that suggested to you that he might want to be the one in control of this trial? He sprang upon everybody this new idea that he blacked out. He's trying to get control of this trial. Did you notice that when my colleague is asking him questions Friday and today, and especially today, he's correcting the attorney, he's correcting the judge? Does he want control of this trial? Is it possible that he wants to control what you're thinking about what he did? Is it possible that he's saying things to try to get you to believe things? You don't have to believe Mark Bent. And so why did he post that? He wants everyone to know that he's in charge. He's in control. And he wants them to know that only because of his decisions are they even alive. So lucky for them. Mark Bent shows the characteristics of somebody who wants to, in some way, make an impact, a mark on society. He keeps failing at his jobs. His social scene's not working out, but he wants to leave a mark of some kind. He wants to leave a mark, but he did not leave a mark. He created a wound in our society. He killed Nick Bird. Nick Bird is not coming back. Nick Bird's mom and dad will never be the same. Nick Bird's friends will never be the same. Nick Bird's girlfriend, remember her? She's still crying 2 years later. And you get the feeling that she would do anything if she could go back in time and undo that little fight, that little lover's quarrel they had at lunch his last day alive, so that she could go patch things up. It created a wound. The only possible consolation for his girlfriend is this. You saw the text messages she wrote to him in his last hour. She was trying to reach out to him and patch things up. She wrote in text messages how much she cared for him, how much he meant to her, and how much she was enjoying her time getting to know him. And we know that he read those messages because he wrote one simple line, "I don't want to fight over the phone." So he knew in his last hours, his last moments, that somebody cared for him and somebody loved him. But wouldn't it be nice if she could have patched things up in person the next day? That was a wound in our society that will never properly heal. So Mark Bent, in the end, did not leave a mark in our society. All he left is a scar. And for that, we hope you will hold him accountable and find him guilty of first-degree murder. Thank you.
Mr. Stint, are you ready to give your closing? Do you want ammo or anything? Or just the mic? Okay.
So at the beginning of the trial, I did ask you to pay attention to the evidence, making sure that everything that's presented, everything that's said, you understand, take good notes, because obviously you don't get to just click a pause button or rewind button, right? So let's see what we know for sure, okay? We know that Mark Bent and Nick Bird knew each other. We know that they were part of the same car club at some point. We know that they had a falling out. There were words exchanged, threats, and things kind of didn't go well with Mark Band. He left the club. There was some notes written by Mark Band. Now we had testimony from a law enforcement officer, detective. He just basically said metadata and just kind of went in. So as the jurors, you get to decide how much weight that testimony carries. You then hear from somebody who's specifically a computer expert can describe the metadata, how it can be changed, how it can be modified, what affects it, whether or not the metadata can be affected by the towers, the signals, the time zones, whether or not there is a virtual private network attached to the phone where you can connect to pretty much any server in the world. There was lots of kind of discrepancy between the times, but it was just kind of explained away, okay, well, let's just have it fit our narrative. Well, that's great, but we are not operating on hopes, we are operating on facts. Same thing happened with the dash cam. Okay, the dash cam says September 4th of 2022. Well, okay, let's just disregard that. It's 14 hours behind. Let's just do some calculations. Again, we are led to believe that the metadata, the dash cam, everything fits the state's narrative. We don't know exactly what modified means in the context of the report or the analysis that the police did. Does it mean it was edited? Does it mean the words were added to the text? Does it mean the words were taken away from the text? Does it mean the note was open? Does it mean somebody scrolled through the Notes app? We don't know. We don't know exactly the context or the meaning of the word modified as it applies to an electronic device, such as a cell phone. So we are just asked to have a common meaning for it, which, when it comes to electronics, the words don't mean what they mean for ordinary person. But we are just led to believe, based on somebody who is not a computer expert, that this is all just, let's just take it all at face value. We know that Nick Bird was angry on September 3rd of 2022. He had a fight with his girlfriend earlier that day. He posted a Snapchat message with some profane words, and you have that in evidence. We know that Mark Band drove from Pocatello to Idaho Falls. We know that Mark Band drove around town, eventually ended up on the west side. By the way, Buffalo Wild Wings is on the west side of town. It's not by Best Buy. So it's just a little south of the neighborhood where finally Mark Band ended up. The state called William Band, that was a state's witness. And William Band testified about speaking with Mark Band. Then the state has introduced William Band's phone calls to 911 to discredit William Band. Basically to say, you know what, that witness we called, and don't believe what he's saying. Yeah, he's lying. Let's not trust him. Okay, so they called the witness and they discredited their own witness. Once a liar, always a liar. Okay, Well, let's just take state's theory of the case at their own face value. William Bent is a liar. Everything he says is a lie. Okay? Well, let's just discount all of that. Let's just walk through the state's theory of the case. Prosecutor told you many times in his closing, you don't have to believe Mark Bent. Okay. Well, let's then accept that premise. Mark Bent is a liar, right? That's what the state is telling you. Once a liar, always a liar. State said, don't believe him. Okay. The messages, the Facebook posts, the 911 phone call, the testimony today. Let's disregard all of that. Erase it from our memory, right? Because he's a liar. So what are we left with? The job of the jury is to decide whether or not the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the crime. Okay, so let's go through the elements of the crime. Let's leave out all the emotions, appeal to the community justice, and all this other, all the other emotional things. Okay, let's just treat this as a math equation. On about September 3rd of 2022. Okay, you know what? We'll concede the state has proven that it happened on September 3rd of 2022. Okay, part one of the equation. Part two, in the county of Bonneville, state of Idaho. I ask you to pay attention, close attention to all the evidence. And I hope your notes are better than mine. I don't remember any of the state's witnesses say that this happened in Bonneville County, state of Idaho. Now, the state will say, well, it's not a big deal. It's okay. It's Idaho Falls. We all know what Idaho Falls is. Well, now, the way the beyond the reasonable doubt works is they have to prove each and every element beyond the reasonable doubt. Nothing is left to imagination. All the facts are laid out and admitted. Number three, so I guess number two, that's missing. Number three, defendant Mark Jason Bent engaged in conduct which caused the death of Nikolas Bird. Okay, that's a two-parter. Okay, the first part is defendant Mark Jason Bent. You heard from two witnesses from the state who pointed to the defendant's table and said, one witness said Mark Bent is sitting at the defendant's table. Another witness said Mark Bent is sitting at the defendant's table wearing a tie and a jacket. Right? There were two people sitting at the defendant's table. You make the call whether or not the state has identified Mr. Bent. Engaged in conduct which caused the death of Nikolas Bird. Again, if we're not trusting Mark Bent about anything he said, then we just have to go by what the evidence is. The biggest thing with first-degree murder would be malice of forethought, and the instruction number 6, or the sixth element, which is you have it in your instructions, but basically willful, deliberate, premeditated killing. There was no premeditation. It's plain and simple. The state hasn't shown any premeditation here. If we accept the state's theory of the case and premeditation, Mark Bent will be the worst killer in the history of all killers. He has a dash cam in his truck that records every single minute of his driving, every single moment of his driving. He has a phone on him. He drives around, he calls the police and tells them what happened. This is not a premeditation case. And the state hasn't shown anything to indicate that. Now the state is asking you to use the fact that Mr. Band decided, he called the police, and they asked him what happened. He said, I better talk to an attorney. The state is using it against him, telling you that, well, he didn't tell them he blacked out. No, he didn't tell them he blacked out. He told the 911 phone call operator, I need to talk to an attorney, which is a right that every person, every citizen of this country has. He exercised his Fifth Amendment right, not to incriminate himself, to talk to his attorney. The state is telling you, well, he must be guilty because he didn't tell you exactly what happened on the first phone call. That's not how this works. We have rules in this country and we have rights that people have. Unfortunately, online bullying is a serious problem. The saying is, the pen is mightier than the sword, and unfortunately it does, it hurts people. And Mr. Ben explained to you that he was upset about all this, he was afraid, he called the police twice, seeking help. They had said, well, good luck, you're on your own. Go get a protection order, which is a piece of paper, right? Gets from the judge, tells you the other person, stay away. So a person who is reaching out for help to authorities is not getting any help. Again, even if we assume that NOP was created in July, which we don't know for sure, he didn't do anything in July. In July, he was staying home, looking for another job. Gowns, magazine, earplugs, so on. He's a competition shooter. This is Idaho. This is not unusual for somebody to have a firearm in their truck. Doesn't mean they're a killer or a murderer. Again, malice or forethought. Forethought does not imply deliberation or lapse of time. It only means that the malice must precede rather than follow the act. So it must happen before the act. Before the act, in this case, Mark Beth is just driving around, okay? If we accept the state's theory of the case and say that Mark Bent is a liar, all you're left with is evidence that he drove from Pocatello to Idaho Falls. when the shooting occurred, if he is a liar, right? So if you disregard everything he told you on the stand Friday and today, but at the end of the day, if you look at the evidence presented, the state just hasn't met its burden. And it's not whether or not we look at the emotional side of this case. No matter what, any death is always tragic. We have to look at the facts. We have to see what exactly did the state prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The state hasn't proven all the elements beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you put away the emotions, just look at the facts, the state has not met its burden. And Mark Bent is not guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Stavinsky. Mr. Neal, rebuttal.
Thank you, Judge. You and I have a very different perception of the trial. The judge and the two lawyers, we get to hear everything. We get to be involved in everything. And so what has happened in the past week, we've been acutely involved with, seeing, understood why there were delays, understood why there were issues. Your experience is different. In some cases, there have been significant delays that have required to just either sit in a room or in other words, not really have something to do while things were worked out. For the delays that I caused, I apologize. It's a hard enough job. I apologize because your time is really valuable. And I don't like to, thank you for your service and those kind of things. Those who watch me make my closing arguments. I don't like pandering. I don't like being ingratiating like that. But in this case, I do feel like I let you down. That you had to go through that, but I apologize. You're owed an apology for the delays. This is the last time I'll get to address you. And so that's why I'm just taking a minute to talk to you about that. One thing that I'll let you in on. My first trial was about a little over 20 years ago, right here in this courtroom. And what I do every time I do a jury trial, they don't happen that often. When I had the most, I think it was probably 4 in a year. And that's a lot for a prosecutor in this area. I have a tradition, it's a superstition. I was buying a tie. I just want that little, I don't know, it's a superstition. I want that little edge. I'm going in front of the jury. And I want you to be aware of something. That's just a really dumb idea. Because the fact is, you've heard that what we say is not evidence, right? And I'm going to take it a step further. The attorneys cannot change what happened. So the things that we say are not what juries really base their decision on anyway. All of you, as we talked in Boyd Dyer, we talked about, what kind of things are you supposed to be looking at as a juror? And each of you, and a larger percentage of the group than I've seen, really concentrated and focused on, I want to see what the evidence is. And so the question that's been posed to you today is, well, did the state meet a burden beyond a reasonable doubt? And I think that sometimes can be a little vague, a little hard to put your finger on. So the standard is not beyond all doubt. It is not beyond the shadow of a doubt. And the standard isn't even that you give a defendant the benefit of the doubt. Those are not the words that are in our law. The word doubt never goes anywhere alone. Only those doubts which are reasonable. I had a great judge I worked with fairly early on in my career, and he talked about speculation. And I remember him from the bench saying, speculation is not reasonable doubt. It's unreasonable doubt. So what would be required to find a reasonable doubt in this case is that the jury would have to ignore evidence. They would have to ignore those things that go to each of the elements that have been shown to you, throughout a week of testimony. And so what I'll do is just start with this idea of reasonable doubt. Is everybody hearing me okay? Let me speak up. All right. In any human investigation, we're not talking fiction where we get to write the story the way we want it to turn out. When we talk about a human investigation, there are going to be certain things that are lost. It's either because we don't find them, we don't have the technology to detect them, and as technology gets better, then of course our cases get better. We are solving crimes now that we couldn't solve before. But each of those things that we're putting together are little pieces of what happened. Unless we have just a video of the crime in progress, which in this case we nearly do, then we miss it by a few seconds. But without that, what we're doing is the police and the witnesses are all trying to provide pieces of the puzzle. When it starts out, we may not know what the image is that we're trying to put together. For example, when Officer Ludovico arrived, she wasn't sure what was happening. She wasn't sure that the person had left. She didn't know what the motive was. She didn't know why someone was lying on the street, how many shots, how close to death. None of that was known. The picture was very incomplete. And piece by piece by piece, what you've heard through the past week painstakingly is we have tried to bring those pieces back together and fit them as closely together as we can. And the pieces fit. The pieces fit. Now some pieces might miss, but at a certain point, it doesn't matter how many more pieces we find. If this was an old unmarked box in the attic, and I found this with no picture, and I started to put these together, there would be a point where no matter how many pieces are missing from that old puzzle, I'm never going to find another piece that's going to change this image. Because if I have a piece that is somehow inconsistent, it won't fit. It won't fit. And that's how we know if I found that a couple of pieces from some other puzzle are trying to be, found their way into this box, I would know, hey, that's not part of this puzzle. Because nothing that we continue to receive, if we could, and there's that frustration, because our goal, of course, we want to have the full puzzle with every piece of puzzle in it. That's the goal of putting a puzzle together. But if the situation is we couldn't, the fact is these other pieces wouldn't change that. It's frustrating. We all want that puzzle to be complete with no pieces missing and no, that success in the case of putting a puzzle together would be 100%. But even in our voir dire, it was known that beyond a reasonable doubt is not 100%. It's not 100%. So when we start talking about, well, what kind of things would mean that the person is not guilty? What would it take? What would it take? And when we see the suggestion that the situation was different from what the image is that's been developing over the last week, then the question has to be, well, we've got a piece of puzzle. Does it fit in here? Does it fit in here? So there's some suggestion that this is not premeditated. Well, if this doesn't fit among our pieces in here, it isn't consistent what's around it. It's not the shape that would be required to fit in there. This doesn't belong in there. The fact that it was not premeditated would require that we wouldn't see indications that it was planned. We wouldn't see indications that a person would develop motive, means, opportunity. All of those had to come together on September 3rd in the same place, or we would not have a crime. And the suggestion that that was random is not reasonable. The suggestion that that was accidental, that the gun, the person, the motive, and the opportunity collided together in an accidental way just before the person lost conscious understanding of what he's doing for about a minute is not reasonable. That's not reasonable. That piece doesn't fit with all the other pieces. And what are those other pieces? Those things he was writing for weeks leading up to it. The fact that he went up to Idaho Falls when he said he was scared of Idaho Falls, that people were threatening him in Idaho Falls, that he drove up there without a single sound. You can listen to his dash cam. Not a single sound, not a single phone call, not a friend in the truck. He arrived in Idaho Falls. He went right to the places he had talked about in his message. Carnies. And those were the only places he went until he drove into a very obscure neighborhood in Idaho Falls. It's not the kind of place you go for a drive. Police officers who have to respond to calls all over the city said they'd never heard of that street before. And you'd also have to ignore the fact that Mark himself testified he looked up the address. He knew where he lived. That was just a coincidence. That was just a coincidence. You'd have to ignore the fact that to find that car, if I may, you'd have to come off the freeway and you'd have to go down Saturn. And even though you know Mark lives in these apartments, you would have to just look and see his car is over here. You'd have to turn off Saturn. You'd have to go through this construction. You'd have to turn down here, go around, make a right turn, come back, go past his car, turn right back onto the very same route, come back, come around here, and park without the intent to kill. You'd have to stay there for 2 hours because Nick isn't there. You'd have to stay there for 2 hours. His car, whoops. His truck, Mark's truck, his car. 2 hours and 1/2 hour before I even see Nick, I have a chance to look at the same message I was writing weeks before about killing him. And yet I don't have an intent to kill Mark Bird. Nick Bird. I'd have to get out under my control, take my gun under my control, draw my gun under my control, and black out. That's all without the intent to kill Nick Bird. Then, after regaining my awareness, and I would have to get into the car, leave, and even though if I blacked out, I should have more questions than answers about what happened, I'm going to take the exact messages that I started writing weeks ago, and I'm going to publicly post them on Facebook, and I'm going to send them to perhaps the 2 people I love the most in the world. Because I'm not going to check out what happened. I'm not going to verify the facts. I'm going to admit to murder to my mother and to my father. And then I'm going to admit a crime which has a life sentence or even worse to my friends. Friends, comma.
Your Honor. Your Honor.
Yes.
Can we talk off the...
Quick sidebar.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now let's talk about credibility. My learned colleague here, the defense counsel, said that if we can't trust one thing that Mark Vance says, we can't trust him. And that you should ignore his testimony. And that the state shouldn't use any of it, or the jury shouldn't use any of it to prove the case. Ignore it all. Even though all of it is basically corroborated by the evidence that was shown by the medical examiners, by the dash cam, by the words that were stated in the various recordings. All of those things corroborate. 90, 95%, 99% of the state's case. Really, we're down to one fact, did he black out? And the words that you don't have to believe everything that you hear are from the instructions. And it says, you have the right to determine what the truth is. You have the right to sort through what somebody is telling you, whether it's true or not. That's your right as jurors. And it says use those common sense things you look for. Have you ever had somebody lie to you? Perhaps you've even had to tell a lie yourself. And how much of the truth did you stick to? Because there's only 2 sources when you're telling a story like that. One is from your imagination, and it's hard to remember all the facts and keep them straight time after time. And the other is from your memory. So the more you tell from that story that's not going to hurt you from your memory, the more consistent it can be, right? Because we're just going to remember our memory every time. When you take that leap out and you put that false fact in, that's when you're using your imagination. So what can I say that would, despite all this other information, despite all the posts and the notes and the camera, What would make me not guilty? So we're going to take a quick step out. About a minute. I saw him on the sending the Snapchat. And then I reacted when I saw I was standing over it. Just knock that one thing out. Otherwise, you're just relying on your memory. And then everything's consistent, right? We're consistent with the facts to state. We're explaining the story. We're telling you why, you shouldn't find me guilty, despite this ever-increasing mound of evidence. Well, that's what you would have to ignore, right? You would have to ignore, how do we know that he planned this? How do we know there was premeditation? Well, we have the record. He even himself called it a plan. Normally, the intent is something that's proven circumstantially. How do we know what that person intended? Well, we look at the circumstances that surround what he did. Well, now we can put together what his intention was. We don't need to do that here. He just laid it out there. He just laid out his intent. My main goal was to kill Nick Bird. And I just coincidentally did during a blackout. Does that sound reasonable? Does that fit? Would you expect something different if that were the case? Would you expect that puzzle piece to fit in differently and change that image? Yet everything that was received in evidence and basically confirmed by the defendant himself points to that puzzle piece not fitting into this image. Yeah, maybe I thought about certain things in my life that I didn't put that much thought into. And then suddenly one day the opportunity came across, and guess what? It came true for me. And that was a happy moment. Serendipity. We're talking about murder. We're talking about a handgun loaded with a magazine of hollow point bullets that was pointed at the human being mentioned, and a trigger pulled 17 times. 17 times. And when you fire that number of shots at somebody, what is the intent? What is the intent? One bullet, hollow point, tearing a wound through a human being is a horrendous thing. 17 attempts, 15 hits. What intent does that show? Now, this was something that was brought up. Not only did Mr. Overby say that it was in Bonneville County in the state of Idaho, but he was asked, Mr. Bent himself, was that in Bonneville County? And the answer was yes. But if you go by your notes, something like that, it's just so routine that people missed it. The chances of these things, means, motive, opportunity, all colliding at 10:30 on September 3rd, followed up with these are confessions to parents and to children. The chances that that happened just coincidentally without intent are just astronomical. And that is not reasonable. You know, in some cases, I've actually had friends or law enforcement, I think even jurors, ask me, well, do you think that person was evil? Is that criminal? Is that guy evil? That's not the job. That's not the job. We're not a chorus of angels determining whether this individual is going to have eternal damnation for what he did. In fact, as jurors, you're not going to consider punishment at all. What is fair in accountability, if he's convicted, is not the juror's role. Well, what is the role? What is the job? We know you're the voice of the community, but what are you here to do? And the simple answer is you're here to reach a verdict. It comes from two ancient words, veritas and dictum. And you'll see in the instruction, it even in English talks about it. The declaration of truth. Veritas, truth, dictum, the declaration. That's your job. Your job is to declare the truth. You are not responsible for the decision made by any defendant. But it is your duty as the voice of this community to hold individuals accountable for the decisions they make. What we are here is not to do is not to condemn and embarrass and humiliate. And your job is not even to punish. It is to declare the truth of this act. To declare what happened on September 3rd. And the only reasonable conclusion where all of those pieces fit together is that Mark Bent formulated the intent to murder Nikolas Bird. And on September 3rd, he entered into Bonneville County with the intent to follow through on that act. What other acts might have been in his mind doesn't matter. But at just around 10:30, after waiting for 2 hours, the decision came to a critical point. Follow through on the plan or walk away. And his decision was to draw his gun and kill Nikolas Bird. And for that, he must be held accountable for the act. His decision, his act, whatever penalty is appropriate should he be convicted, is going to be based on a lot more information for somebody else to consider. But your job is not to ignore evidence. Your job is not to speculate. Your job is not to create, some way out. We're not picking sides here. What happened is what happened. We can change what we say happened, but we can't change what happened. The truth is what the truth is. It does not change by emotion. It does not change by persuasion. It does not change by eloquence. As humans, we have limitations on everything we can know. But in this case, from this evidence, there is only one reasonable conclusion. and only one reasonable outcome. So I ask you to find Mark Bent guilty of first degree